I have no idea what it sounds like. That's that. Just falling apart.
So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Five Irons Forging. On today's episode, we're going to talk about refractory materials. Now, we use refractory materials, which are basically anything that reflects heat waves, and we use that to make our foundries out of. We use a formula that consists of plaster and sand and water, given to us by, I shouldn't say given to us.
Yeah, given's a little bit of a stretch, but we'll roll with it.
Right.
Thank you, Grant.
That we found at Grant Thompson, the King of Random. So,
And we will link his video down below.
And we followed
If I
his
can figure out how to do that.
And we followed his formula, and it worked for us for a little bit, and then sort of failed spectacularly. We'll show you pictures of that in a second. So we modified the formula a little bit to try to find out what works best for us, our climate and stuff. And we have two test batches here. Now, to test the test batches, we're going to drill into them to test structural integrity. We're going to burn them. I shut that off. And then we're going to burn them and then drill into the burn marks to see if that affects the structural integrity of the mix.
Okay, so our test batch is here. Our original compound that we got off of Grant, like Jacob was saying, uses plaster, sand, and water. And Grant's ratio was a 1:1 to 0.7-ish of plaster, sand to water. The problem we ran into with that was after the 12 hours or so of smelting that we did, it started to crumble apart. The structural integrity really took a nosedive. And after that, we just sort of left it outside. It got rained on and it's totally trashed now. The pictures of it are interesting. It's like a barren moonscape of desolation. Now, ours wasn't exactly built to his specifications. We should add, he used a steel bucket, not aluminum, and not plastic like ours. Also, he had a lid for his. When we tried making the lid, we couldn't get the compound for the lid to even set properly, so we never even had a lid. We wound up using a baking sheet.
Also, don't use a baking sheet.
Didn't work very well.
Yeah.
So we went to the drawing board. We got out the old pen and paper. We tried to do a little bit of science, or at least as much science as we do when Cole's not here. For test formula number 1, the ratio we used was 1.25 plaster to 1 sand to 0.75 water. So basically, we just increased the plaster, and I increased the water up to 0.75 because that's an easier number to deal with than the 0.714 ad infinitum that came out of Grant's calculations. And then with test number 2, I actually increased the water to a 1-to-1 ratio with the sand. So test number 1 is 1.25 plaster to 1 sand to 0.75 water. Test number 2 is 1.25 plaster to 1 sand to 1 water. And that one came out a lot smoother than the other ones. As it was setting, it wasn't all chunky. It was actually smooth, and it looked a lot more like it's supposed to look, a lot more like it looked in Grant's video. So I have a lot more confidence in this test number 2 than I do in the test number 1. Okay, so this here is our original foundry. Like I said, this is the one where we used Grant's compound, only we didn't use the steel bucket, we used a plastic one. And obviously that didn't hold up very well to the several thousand degree heat that was inside the foundry. And unfortunately, the foundry itself didn't hold up too well. It wasn't quite this bad right after, but it was starting to fall apart. Pieces were breaking off. This is the result of several days left, well, several weeks or maybe even a couple months left outside and totally untended. And as you can see, it's just reverting back to its sand and plaster state. It's absolutely destroyed. Like I said, it worked well for the one time we used it for about 12 hours straight, and then it crumbled apart. And as we were also saying, during the actual mixing process, it didn't quite look right, so I'm not entirely surprised that it wound up failing. I'm not sure what we did wrong, but obviously that's why we're doing some test batches. Okay, this one over here, this is our test compound number 1. So this is the one that uses a little bit less water with a lot more plaster. And this is also the one that wound up with the coarser sand in it. So as you can see, it's really crumbly. It's really rough in texture, sort of like our original one looked before we fucked it up. And then over here, we have test compound number 2. This is the one where we kept the same plaster and sand ratio, but we increased the amount of water, and we used the play sand that we used for our original foundry. As you can see, the texture here is a lot smoother, and the texture was smooth throughout the entire process, sort of like Grant's was. So I do have high hopes for this, and I hope it doesn't fail me, but I've been disappointed before. All right. So as far as the results of that test, I'm actually rather surprised and impressed. Because with our first one, when we drilled into it, it was still goopy in the middle. Like, it was still wet. And that was after hours of sitting in the hot sun. It was still wet on the inside.
This one, yeah,
that held up way better than I thought. Test bucket number 2. This is the one I really believe in, so don't fail me, little bucket.
All right, ready?
Ready.
Set. Oh, wow. I think that held up a lot better.
That held up way better. You can actually drill into that without it just falling apart. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll do a quick side by side. That's number 2. That's number 1.
Ready when you are.
All right. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and say that's sufficient for the moment.
Yeah, it's about 30 seconds.
Okay, so that's 30 seconds of direct heat from the propane torch on compound number 1.
That's a little bit of damage.
A little bit of damage, and I don't know if you could see it in the video, but pieces were starting to flake off on the side, which could be just from holding the bucket. It might have warped a little bit, but it might have also been because they were starting to heat up. Ready?
Ready when you are.
All right, here we go. All right. That's 30 seconds on compound number 2. Actually, it doesn't look as burnt as number 1 did.
Yeah.
All right, drill test for number 1. Oh, wait. Okay.
I don't know. It seems a little crumbly.
A little crumbly. Still a little crumbly. It's a little warm in there. It didn't really get up to the same heat that it's going to have to endure, but you can see these pieces sort of falling apart here.
Yeah, I'm not terribly confident about that.
Not terribly confident about that one. It definitely seems to crumble a good bit.
Definitely seems to survive more.
That definitely held up better. A lot better. All right.
Looks like eyes.
Oh, help me. Oh, please, I'm stuck in the bottom of this bucket. They lit me on fire. Help. All right. So I think that we can pretty confidently say that number 2 holds up better than number 1.
It definitely does.
And would you say that we could move forward using number 2 to create a foundry? Are you confident enough in its abilities to test it with an actual foundry?
I will endorse it.
I will too. All right. That's good for the tests. Fuck. All right. Thanks for joining us here at Five Irons Forge. we learned a little bit tonight. We had a little bit of fun.
A lot of fun.
We always have fun when there's fire and breaking shit involved. This little guy here is actually the core that we drilled out of test bucket number 2. And honestly, I'm actually very impressed with how well this held up. I mean...
Yeah, like, you can't crush it in your hand.
Which is something that you couldn't say about our original foundry. It just crumbled apart.
Yeah, like you could drop it,
and it's
fine. So
all in all, a success. I'd say we have something that we can actually make a foundry out of. And that's good. That was our goal here today.
Yeah, look for that in a future video. If you like these videos, be sure to check the like button, hit the little bell, and subscribe. And
as always, we'll see you next time.
And don't try anything we do at home.
Ever.
We are professional amateurs.
We are. Emphasis on the amateur.
Bye.
Fuck you, bucket.
We ready?
Ready. Okay, we should have seen that coming. We're smarter than that, I swear. All we need is a 2-year-old iPhone and a towel. Oh shit. This is what's called a masonry bit. It's for drilling through masonry. Oh wow.
Sadie, say hi. Hi, Sadie. Hey.
See, there was a point to hitting the subject. Why would less water make it smooth?
Fuck you, buckets. Turn the key. Nothing happens. All the lights come on, but when I turn the key, it doesn't even like click. And I'm like, well, son of a bitch. So, old Black Decker drill.
So like, apparently there are these drawers that pull out that the dog bowls go into.
Oh, that's fancy.
Right? So this is what's left of our bucket. As you can see, it held up quite nicely throughout the testing.
Yep. So all we had to do.
That problem too.
All we had to do was put it in neutral and start.
I got that like I was like, fucking idiots.
Probably.
Served us well, little bucket. But I was afraid that it